Aylward is next.
Thank you, Chairman. Unfortunately, I went into witness. Unfortunately, I'd probably be overlapping and a lot of that's been said already because we're all in the same line and that's the same kind of questions. I'll just start with the pricing review. You said it's overdue with 2 or 3 years now. It's been ongoing. Who is holding up the pricing review, and who is involved in is it the National Treatment Purchase Fund, the HSE? What role do they all play? The Minister, the Department of Health. Who decides among the whole four? We say of health. Who decides on what's going to happen in the future? And it's been held up. And why it's been held up? I know you mentioned it, but why do you think yourself the reason for this? The review is not taking place sooner rather than later?
Well, as I said in my opening remarks, it was mentioned when the review was published in 2015 that it would be done within 33 months. Yeah. So it was due on the 1st of June last year. As I understand it, and based on the minutes that have been released under Freedom of Information, it confirmed that Deloitte and Prospectus submitted their piece on time. So I suppose, in essence, that's a question for the Treatment Purchase Fund who are up after ourselves here this afternoon, because we are concerned at the delay and the prevarication around publishing that review.
And what role does the HSE play, and what role does the Department of Health, and what role does the Minister play, as well as the NTPF? What role do they all have in deciding the scheme and the services that we want into the future? What role do they all play along the line?
Well, ultimately, the Minister and the Oireachtas set the legal parameters. So, in terms of the Act, which is the Health Act 2007, and then subsequently the Nursing Home Support Scheme Act 2009, they are obviously set by the Department of Health, the Minister, and indeed ratified by the Oireachtas. So that's in terms of that element of it. The HSE are administrators of the scheme, so they administer the budget on an annual basis. And the NTPF then have a role. Their role is confined to negotiating with the private sector.
So who's dragging the feet?
Well,
who do you hold responsible for dragging the feet on review?
Well, the review.
Putting you on the spot here now.
Yeah, well, I would say that the National Treatment Purchase Fund, I'm surprised and disappointed the fact that they haven't published that pricing review.
Why would you think they're doing that? Why do you think they're dragging it on and keeping it going for a year over a year now?
That's a matter for them to answer.
Well, we'll ask them later on, yes. But I just want to get your view. Just again, come back to what you said in your opening statement. A quarter of state funding for nursing care, home care, is going to the public nursing home costs, and they're only caring for 20% of residents. That means that 80% are left back to the voluntary and to yourselves, to the private nursing home. So that's very unfair, and then figures you're throwing out there, it doesn't sound right to me. It's off. A third of the money, the total money that's being spent, is going for 20% of the care. That means 2/3 is going to 80% of the care. Straight away, there's something wrong there. There's a question mark there straight away. Again, I was just looking at it. I don't want to be going back. I just looked at my own campaign from Kilkenny.
Yes.
I see there's one nursing home and there's 8 homes of, I suppose, voluntary and private. And I get representation on a continuous basis from the private nursing homes in my own area, because naturally being a local politician, and then the voluntary section, who actually have to go out and fundraise. I know there's 1 or 2 of them very near me, and I pay into it and pay towards the fundraise them to keep the doors open. To me, this sounds very wrong. And I just took an average there where in the one nursing home in Kilkenny it's cost 1,596, where in the voluntary and yourselves private 901. That's almost 600 of a difference. 77% I worked in it there, according to the chart here in front of us.
That's right.
I mean, that's massive money. Do you know the value we could have got? I mean, I want to keep all the services open because they're all needed.
Yes.
But that shows there's an awful anomaly there between the public and the private and voluntary.
Absolutely, and that was the point of producing such a table, so that yourselves, in your role as public accounts, could through the value for money review, through your dealings with public bodies such as the HSE and the NTPF, and indeed the CNAG, try and get to the bottom of this anomaly and inequity.
Yeah, because, as you said, because the statistics and people are growing, living longer and staying on, we need more, and we need more private nursing homes. And if it's not going to be fair an equal distribution, we're going to see, because I know private nursing homes are under pressure, and when you go around canvassing, etc., you're going into and meet them, and they're all telling you, and look, we're trying to keep the doors open here, and it's getting harder and harder and harder, and provide the services as well. So, right. I mean, it tells its own story. It's going any further. I just want to come to fair deal again and touch on things of the fair deal. deal, how do you think the fair deal is being implemented and it's working? So, it was a good idea when it was introduced by Mary Harney and etc. and everyone was delighted. How do you think it's working now, and from your own perspective as private nursing?
Well, clearly we're disappointed with the pricing element of it. I mean, from the residents' point of view, I think the fair deal is a good scheme. In terms of the certainty around the availability of nursing home care, and it means that people know in advance how much they have to contribute themselves based on their income and indeed their assets. But clearly from an operator and from a representative body point of view, the pricing element is deeply flawed, and that's what the pricing review was committing to deal with and address. But again, the delay in that is impacting negatively and very severely, as you said in your own words, people trying to keep the doors open. It's getting more difficult. The cost of operation, the dependency level of older people, the cost of care, the complexity of that care, the cost of regulation, commercial rates, its costs are just going one way. Whereas in fact what we're seeing on the other side is trying to maintain, to use Deputy Connolly's phrase, value for money. But value for money, there comes a tipping point whereby operators will no longer be able to sustain viable services.
I just want, because I'm from the agricultural sector myself, I just want to ask you about the agricultural sector. You know, we've raised this last year, and the IFA and other body, farm and body representatives, about the discrepancies there against agriculture and probably private business as well. And where there's a cap at 3 years of 7.5% on individuals, and then when you come to the farm community, there's no cap. I just want to get, before I ask the other next group coming in, I just want to get your opinion on that, where you stand on that as a private supplier.
Well, I mean, from our point of view, it's up to the resident ultimately to choose which nursing home they wish to reside in under the fair deal. But we have engaged with Minister Daly, and we understand that there is an amendment currently with the Office of the AG, as I understand it, to remove that particular element of what the farming community would see as unfairness. So that's a matter for yourselves and in the policymakers. And when you're making amendments to the scheme, I would suggest, back to Deputy Castle's point, that you would also look at the definition of long-term residential care services.
Yeah, well, I wanted to get your view on it before the
yes,
PPF, and that's why I wanted to ask you that. Just, you mentioned medical cards. I can get it right. Did you say when people go into private nursing homes that they lose their medical cards, or did you? I didn't get that. What you your open statement. You know, if you're trying to a medical card and you go into a private nursing home, you still carry that medical card with you. I just wondering what you meant by the medical cards. You mentioned there. I didn't get it right.
Yeah, no. The point I'm making, Deputy, and it's a very important point, is that the point I was making was that when people cross the threshold, they don't lose their entitlement to services, but the availability of services is much restricted. In that, you know, if you're an occupational therapist or physiotherapy, the provision of such is probably a higher priority if a person is in the community. Whereas when they're in a nursing home, we have letters on file, for example, from the HSE saying we don't provide service to.
They don't lose the service, do they? Because they're in a private nursing home.
They don't lose it, but they don't receive the service.
But why?
Because there's a waiting list.
We stay at home, and
that's
then
right.
they go into a nursing home, then I'm entitled to that service. I didn't know this, though. I mean, that's news to me.
Well, that's the point I'm making. It's discrimination of older people on the basis of where they reside. If they were living in their own home, on the main street, they would continue.
Who's deciding this? I mean, the
HSE ultimately.
Yeah, the person deserves the same treatment.
Absolutely.
At home, and just because they go into a nursing home and say, well, say they must have enough money to pay to go into a private nursing home, and then they lose these services. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, absolutely. There's a piece actually in the longer opening statement which HICWA referenced a number of years ago in relation to provision of such services, and primarily they were highlighting the fact that that because of the waiting list, because of the unavailability of primary care services or indeed GMS services, the HSE themselves, to be fair, undertook a quality and patient safety audit a number of years ago, and they also highlighted that there were, I suppose, a postcode lottery in some respects. So it is down to, again, back to maybe funding, like you spoke about in the local authority. Historically, if there was a range of services, it may be provided, but we have, as I say, numerous letters on file where it's not provided because they're in a private involved nursing home.
You used the word discrimination. That is discrimination.
It is discrimination, absolutely. We've raised this with the Ombudsman as well, in fact, and he has received some complaints recently on that. We've also raised it a number of years ago with the Equality Authority, Because,
and what excuse do they give if a patient looks for this service that they had in private at home, and now all of a sudden, what excuse are they given? Oh, we can't do it because they're living because they're a resident in a nursing home. Is that the reason?
Not because they're a resident in a nursing home. It's because the unavailability of service is that the service is already stretched to provide care to others, so they're not in a position to provide it to a resident.
For example, are you saying that if somebody has a medical card and needs to see their GP, they're in a nursing home away from where their GP was, the GP is not going to make a 40-mile trip to see him, they're not capable of going out to see the GP?
Correct.
The nursing home probably has an arrangement where a GP visits once a week or something like that, and that's it.
They must have GP services. Just because they went to a nursing home doesn't mean they have GP services.
GPs are not going to travel to see their patients who are now in the nursing home 20 miles away.
So if they get sick in a nursing home, what GP comes to?
A&E, I presume.
Well, to be fair, we work closely with the GPs, and GPs, they can argue for their own cause. Yeah. But in effect, there would be regular GP cover there.
Yeah, it wouldn't be if you have 100 people in a nursing home and there's 20 different GPs dealt with them before they come in. You're not having all the 20 GPs coming in regularly. Or would you have one or two dedicated? Would nursing homes have an arrangement with a GP to kind of provide the GP service?
Well, in fact, the HICWA standards stipulate that it's the resident's choice to maintain their existing GP.
Was that very practical?
Well, I suppose that's something that will hopefully be dealt with as part of the GMS contract. It's more around access to allied health services.
Okay.
So to answer your question, I can come back to you and give you some information and documentation. It's around physiotherapy, occupational therapy, speech and language, maybe specialised wheelchairs, for example, that one would ordinarily be entitled to, but they find that when they're in residential care, it's not as easy to procure.
Deputy, just the last one. This contracts for care you spoke about. Roughly, I think it's about 80% of OAPs and all that pay their pension towards contracts for care. The extras, and we read every now and again in the papers and newspapers, and not making any accusations here, where there's extras and the 20% that they have left is being taken for the service, the extra service like hairdresser, whoever, I can't think of them all now, but that's. Also, there's question marks about how that money is being used, and the patients are old and some are senile, and who takes care of that 20%, how to spend, and then what money is left over, and that's you're depending on yourselves in your situation, someone within the system to look after that 20% of the money and to make sure the services are being provided that they're paying for. And that there's sometimes, I even got a phone call from a journalist one time to know when you were coming in front of us to ask these questions, to know are they misappropriation of some money in some institutions like yourselves. I don't mean misappropriation in the wrong sense, but value for money for the 20% that's left. Can you just comment on that and generally what way you handle that extras and the 20% money that's there? Yeah,
I mean, ultimately the money has belonged to the resident. It's their money, and they choose how they wish to spend it. But if they reside in a nursing home, there is a contract agreed either with the resident or indeed their representative, if that be the case, that sets out all of those fees. Based on the individualised care plan that I spoke about earlier on, in terms of their will and preferences, in terms of their requirements. So it's all transparent, all up front, but it's a feature of the scheme ultimately, because the scheme excludes those services. And who oversees, we say, it's up to each individual private nursing home to provide that service. And it is. Who oversees, make sure there's no wrongdoings, and if there's money there left over for savings, we say, someone say that extra they want to put away €20 a week just for savings to some old people who might want to bury themselves or whatever, the individual, who oversees that and who makes sure that it's being done and carried out properly according to their wishes? Especially if they haven't family. Members. I suppose if the family members is different, they're coming in there on a regular basis and they're making sure the money is being spent right. But if they haven't family members, it's up to the nursing care to provide all that, nursing home care to provide all that. I just want a general opinion on that. Yeah, I mean, it's laid out in the regulations and laid out in the standards. So HICWA will oversee that effectively as the independent regulator. And have you come across any wrongdoing? We say, does that happen? Not that I'm aware of. In fact, there was one complaint to the Ombudsman in 2016 on the matter of charge for services, and that wasn't upheld. Okay.
move on. You give
And there is a complaints procedure as well. I think it's important to say that if people
There's a
do it.
complaints procedure there.
Absolutely, and it's important that people would avail of that complaints procedure if they feel.